presenting this work. So I'd like to introduce Kathy Smolinski, who's an associate clinical professor and the director of the legal advocacy for the People with Cancer Clinic at the Wayne State University Law School, and Min Wong, an adjunct professor and staff attorney for the legal advocacy for People with Cancer Clinic at Wayne State. And before I officially turn it over to them, I want to let everyone know we're having another seminar June 13th. The next topic is discussing cost concerns with healthcare providers, and we will send an email to everyone who registered for this meeting with additional information about that seminar and the ability to register in the coming days. And then I think we have one more, and I want to just let everyone know if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to go ahead and go through the presentations all at once, but we will be monitoring the chat for questions. There will hopefully also be some time at the end for open discussion. At the end, we will also put a survey link and a link to an evaluation in the chat. We do appreciate everyone's feedback on all of these, and there is a $50 gift card raffle for people who do complete the evaluation. So we're trying to sweeten the pot a little bit for everyone to do that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy and Min. And please, everyone, feel free to put questions in the chat. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Teresa. I'm just going to make sure that I can share my screen here. How does that look? Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Looks great.
Great, thank you. Let me just see if I can see it now. Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone. I'm very excited to be here. I'm Kathy Smolinski, and my comrade Min Huang will be talking a little bit later. We're going to talk about understanding disability benefits for individuals with cancer. And this is a big topic. So, Teresa asked us to cover this, so we're going to do our best in the time. But you may walk away with more questions than answers, but that's okay, because at least it will get you thinking in the right direction to be able to explore things more often to make sure that you're getting the benefits that you're due. So just a disclaimer, both Min and I are practicing attorneys, but we're not here to give legal advice. We're here to provide legal information. So feel free to take down a lot of the information that we provide. And if you think that you do need the help of an attorney, please feel free to attempt to find one. The State Bar of Michigan is always a good place to start. So there's really three main ways to obtain disability insurance. The first way is to get it through your private, through your employer. So that can be both short-term and long-term, or either, or privately purchasing it yourself, or through a government program. So I'm going to talk briefly about the first two ways, through your employer and purchasing it privately. And then Min's going to talk about the various government agencies that provide disability benefits, both at the state level and at the federal level. So when you look at employer-sponsored disability benefits, you want to think about the fact that, how long can you really live without a paycheck? Most people rely on their paychecks to cover basic expenses in their lives, and maybe some to put away for a rainy day, but definitely if there's a reason they can't go to work, how are they going to cover their costs? And so disability benefits are one way to do that. What a lot of people don't realize is that disability benefits are offered at a percentage of your regular salary. So it's all contract driven. What do I mean by that? It's all based on the policy that you have. So if it's through your employer, it's the policy that your employer has with the company that they're providing the benefits through. But usually it ranges on some percentage, and we'll talk about that. Usually 60%, sometimes more, sometimes less. Okay. So it's usually offered by your employer, and you usually can get it taken out before you have to be pay taxes. So that's kind of nice. It's sort of a benefit when you get it through your employer. You usually comes through on your paycheck, and is usually paid. The premiums usually paid before taxes are taken out. Make sure that you're enrolled in your employer's plan if you want to be. What do I mean by that? Well, most of the time when you first become employed somewhere, they offer you benefits and you sign up for them. Sometimes you don't sign up for them when you're first employed, and then you think about it later, like, oh, I really could use that benefit now. And usually during open enrollment for most employers, and like the month of October, sometimes into November, you're choosing your benefits for the next calendar year. So if you haven't been enrolled in a benefit program, a disability benefit program, and you want to, you may have the opportunity to enroll in one for the following year. Sometimes employers change providers. Under the law, they have to always let you know if there's a change in your benefits, if there's a change in your provider, if you need to sign up with a new provider, etc. You want to just be aware of how your employer communicates with you regarding your benefits and make sure that you're on that email list, or that you're reading those emails when they come, or paper, however they get information to you. Because if they do switch providers and you have to sign up with a new provider, and they provided enough notice about that, and you don't sign up with the new provider, then you don't have benefits. And unfortunately, we worked with a client that's exactly what happened. The employer changed providers. The employee did not sign up, thought that she had the benefit, and then when she went to go make a claim, realized that she hadn't been paying into short-term disability benefits for several months. One of the ways to make sure that you're paying is, if it comes through your paycheck, look at your paycheck every now and then. Most people don't look at their pay stub, but if you look at your pay stub will usually say something like short-term disability or long-term disability, and then it'll show the premium that you're paying each month. So a lot of times people will ask, well, what's the difference between short-term and long-term? People don't always quite understand the difference. And they're both disability programs. They both require you to have a disability that is going to be very specific on the policy itself. So what do I mean by that? So just like auto insurance, health insurance, any kind of insurance, disability benefits are an insurance program that you are enrolled in through your employer. And so they're going to have, the policy is going to have all the rules. So that's the way to look at it. Policy is going to have the rules. And so how they define disability is based on how the policy defines disability. So it can be certain diagnoses, it can be certain diagnoses with limitations, et cetera. But you're going to want to look at the policy to know. So short-term and long-term, a lot of employers offer both. Some only offer long-term, some only offer short-term. But it really comes down to what's in a name. So short-term disability is exactly that. It's short-term. It usually covers anywhere between 13 to 26 weeks. So you think about it, so a few months to about 6 months. And long-term disability usually then begins after that. Short-term disability will end. It usually, sometimes I've known a couple clients who have been on short-term disability as long as a year and as long as 2 years, but then it ended. It really depends on the policy. It depends on if you're still meeting the definition, and it depends on what that policy says about what kind of events or time ends that policy, but it will end at some point. Long-term disability is a little bit different. It will end as well, but it can go on for a very long time. So it's meant to help you have income while you're living with a disability, and it can last for years. And depending if you're still meeting the definition, it can actually last all the way up until under the policy, sometimes it will say when you've reached retirement age. So it can actually go through, and actually, if your retirement age is 65, you actually could be claiming this disability that long. It really depends on the policy. Short-term disability, because it's shorter term, usually replaces a larger amount of your salary. So it usually replaces anywhere between 60 and 70%. Long-term, it can be less than that. It can be as low as 40%, but they're paying you supposedly for a longer period of time. So you just want to think about that. And then usually short-term will begin immediately. Of course, you have to always make a claim for it, but it usually begins immediately. Long-term, it doesn't. You want to sort of look at it, the fact that they're kind of ensuring, if you will, that you actually are on a disability for a long term. So they have what they call an elimination period, meaning you can't get or make a claim for it or get on to the benefits until at least a certain amount of months have passed. Sometimes it's as short as 90 days, 3 months. Sometimes it's as long as 6 months. Okay. So even if your short term has run out, if your policy, your long-term disability policy says it has an elimination period of 6 months, that means you can't even begin it until 6 months into it. There's also some things to think about when you're going through an employer-sponsored group coverage. So the eligibility is usually based on employment status rather than individual evaluation. So what I mean by that, so the way benefits are normally provided at a company is everybody on a certain level gets the same benefit package. So people within a company might have different benefits, but under the law, everybody in the same classification has to have the same benefits. That's kind of how that works. And so you're usually offered a particular long-term disability policy, and there usually doesn't have to be any underwriting for it. In other words, there doesn't necessarily always have to be a health check with it when it's offered through your employer. It could be, but there doesn't have to be. The premium can be based on things such as, your age, et cetera. And it's usually a set dollar amount or a percentage of your salary. So that's kind of how it is when you get it through your employer. It will tell you it pays at 60% of your normal salary, et cetera. And they're usually not portable. You usually can't take them. It's like you have it when you work, and when you stop working there, then you don't have that benefit anymore. It's not a benefit that you carry to another job. So if you're going to leave a job, now there could be the chance that it converts to an individual plan and you can take it with you, but that's pretty rare. So that's just one thing to think about, which is different than when you get a private So when you get a private disability, and when I think like Aflac, there's all different companies that offer private disability insurance. That's when you purchase it on your own. You don't purchase it through an employer. And there are programs out there. They're not tied to your job. They're really tied to your personal medical history because you're purchasing it as yourself. You're not purchasing it through an employer. It's can be really helpful if your job doesn't offer short-term and long-term disability, or it can be helpful to supplement one that your job does offer if you have, let's say, for example, a lot of dependents that you're responsible for, and maybe your job only pays up to a certain percentage. You may want to add another private policy to sort of have a couple policies in the event that you have a disability. You can be being paid from a couple different policies at once. I had one client who had like 3 separate private policies, and they were all paying her at once when she became disabled. You can purchase it on your own. That's how that works. And then it stays with you. Even if you leave the job you're currently in, it stays with you because it's a privately purchased plan. So it's just something to think about. In some people do have both. Some people have the one through their employer and then will also purchase another one as well. So there are factors that can change how much your premium might be. So for example, if you have a particular hazardous occupation, you're working with heavy equipment, your medical history, the elimination period can be different from policy to policy, and how long the benefit goes can be different. Now, a lot of people will say to me, well, I thought the Affordable Care Act got rid of like pre-existing conditions. It did for health insurance. This isn't health insurance. This is disability insurance. They are deciding how to insure you. So absolutely your medical history can come into play when you're buying a private policy, for sure. And even when you're doing it through the employer, there can be sometimes underwriting that happens when they want to take your medical history, or particular individuals with pre-existing conditions may not be eligible for disability benefits until a particular month of employment, or till at least a year after their last treatment for that particular illness. So I just want you to understand, disability insurance is not health insurance. It's replacement income, and they can have rules on how people are eligible and when benefits start, when they end, and it's all policy driven. That's why it's really important to get a copy of your policy, to read it. If you don't understand it, have somebody in HR help you with it, but to really know what a benefit is there for you, you really need to look at the policy. So there are some key terms that you're going to see if you look at a policy or if you're talking to somebody that you really want to understand. So one of them we already talked about was the elimination period. And the elimination period is, like I said before, it's the time that you have to sort of sit with your disability before they start paying the benefit. Okay. Disability, what is defined as a disability? That's really, really important. And usually what happens when you make a claim for disability benefits, medical information usually has to be provided. Usually we'll sign an authorization to have them obtain your medical records, or they may ask you to provide specific medical records. Then at some point, they usually will ask to review again to make sure that you're still eligible for benefits. And that could be in the policy. It may say every 6 months or every year we do a review to see if you're still eligible. And then they'll ask for additional medical records. Partial benefits. So that's really good to look at your policy to see if you are disabled to an extent where you can only work part-time. You're only able to tolerate so many hours a week, and then you can't work anymore. You need to go home and rest. Does your disability policy cover that? Many don't. Many only cover if you're going to be off completely, but some might. So you need to know that. Another thing that's really important is how the benefits coordinate. So a lot of people will say, well, if I'm getting paid from one policy, does that make a difference when I'm getting paid from another policy? And the truth of the matter is, you have to look at the policy. But for the most part, employer sponsored and private sponsored, you've paid into those, you get paid, you'll get those benefits. What the difference is when you start getting Social Security disability, because let's say as your employer, I'm giving you, your benefit is, let's say $300. I'll say it's, math is easier this way. Let's say it's $1,000 a month is your disability benefit. But right in the policy, it says, however, you need to apply for any and all federal or state benefits that you could be eligible for. And then your benefit will be reduced based on that benefit. So you'll still get $1,000 a month, but you now might only get $600 from your employer because Social Security is kicking in the other $400. So if I've had clients say, well, I just won't apply for Social Security disability then. Well, if you really read the fine print on a policy, it says, you need to apply, if you're eligible or could be seen eligible. And if you don't apply, and we think you meet the criteria, we will just go ahead and reduce your benefit, the amount that you would have received. So then you really lose because your employer has every right to do that because it's right in the policy. So it really is to your best benefit to go and apply for Social Security because they can go ahead and reduce your benefit anyways. Okay. And then the waiver of premium. This is really, really important because, as I said, your premium gets paid through your paycheck. Well, if you're out on disability, okay, and now your paycheck is reduced, do they still require you to pay the premium? You're now using the benefit. Do you still have to pay into the benefit? So you want to know that. You want to know if premiums still need to be collected while you're actually on the benefit itself. Does the premium increase at any point in time? You just want to know that about the is there a way to purchase further options? So a lot of times employers may provide a certain amount, but you can, and it's free, it's part of your benefit package, but for so much money a month, you can purchase more. So it's just something to know. Cost of living adjustment, does the benefit ever change based on the fact that you've now been there for 5 or 6 years? Is the benefit the same that it was when you first started, or does it adjust now that 6 years later? And the amount, again, is it a percentage or is it a set amount, right? So if you get promoted and it's a percentage, that could be really great because it's going to be 80% of what, or 60% of whatever salary you got If it's a set amount, it's a set amount no matter how much money you normally make, because you want to think about replacing your income. So you want to think about that. And then finally, just to kind of show you how all this sort of works out together, Min, actually, I will give him credit because he developed this lovely little diagram. And it just talks about kind of how these benefits can line up. Okay, so sometimes when you're first diagnosed, some people have purchased through their employer what they call catastrophic illness benefit, where they get a chunk of money, if you will. Then usually from the last day that they work, a lot of times people will get paid for their vacation time or their sick pay. Let's say they have several weeks of that. Then usually it will go into short-term disability. So a lot of times people will have to leave work, they may have to use up their vacation or their sick time, and then they can make a claim for short-term disability. Then FMLA, which we talked about last month, can then protect your job during some of that period of time. That doesn't provide money, but it can protect your job while you're out on disability. After that, long-term disability kicks in, right? So you might have got your catastrophic amount, now your short-term disability, then long-term disability kicks in. And then usually after that, you can get some federal benefits. And that's actually what Min's about to talk to in just a couple minutes, is the federal benefits that can come into play either with your long-term benefits or after your long-term benefits. Another thing to keep thinking about is healthcare through this period of time. So normally when you're out on short-term disability or long-term disability, what will happen is you will get your premiums for your health insurance still taken out of that amount. So if your premiums were coming out of your full salary, now they may be coming out of your reduced salary on disability. So that's something you want to think about. You want to make sure that your healthcare premiums are still being paid. If you have to leave work, you might have to leave that job, then you can think about COBRA, taking your health insurance with you. And then once you're on federal benefits for at least 2 years, you can be eligible for Medicare. So it's just something to remember that disability is only income, it's not health insurance. So you want to make sure that you're still protected that way. And that's it for private and employer sponsored. I'm going to stop now, and Min's going to talk to you a little bit about federal and state benefits.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. So now that Kathy's told you all about long-term and short-term disability through work, and also options as far as purchasing disability benefits privately through a company, we're going to now talk about government-sponsored disability benefits programs. All right. Now we're going to start with the state level, since that's probably going to be the quickest one. The main one we're looking at here is state disability assistance through the state of Michigan. All right. So let's look at some of the details of this program and how do you actually become eligible for it. All right. One common theme that you'll see with these benefits programs is that in addition to being found disabled, however that term is defined by the program, there are usually going to be a set of non-medical requirements that you have to meet. All right. So with state disability assistance, there are going to be income limits as well as asset limits. All right. The one here for the asset limit, you're looking at $15,000 in countable assets. Okay. And I want to emphasize the word countable, because not every piece of asset will necessarily count towards this maximum asset that you can have and still be eligible for this benefit. All right. Now, as far as medical eligibility goes, what does disability really mean? Well, the way that disability is defined by the state for purposes of the state disability assistance program, it means having one or more severe physical or mental impairment that has impacted your ability to do work for at least 90 days, all right? We'll come back to this same definition later when we talk about federal benefits through Social Security, but as you'll see later on, the time frame is a little bit different. It's going to be a little bit longer than 90 days, all right? Now, to apply for state disability assistance is pretty straightforward. It's much the same way that you apply for other benefit programs with the state of Michigan. You just go through, you either go to your local MDHHS office, or if you have an MI Bridges account, you can apply through that as well. All right. Now, once you submit the application, what will happen is your case will get sent over to a state agency called the Disability Determination Service, DDS. And DDS will be the ones who will be reviewing your medical records and making a determination as to whether or not you meet the definition of disability that the state uses. All right. Now, once you apply for the program and you get approved, what do you actually get? All right. Now, with state disability assistance, the benefit amount, unfortunately, isn't very high. It's only about $200 a month. All right. And with that, it also comes with some what I would like to call terms and conditions. All right. The first one is that once you apply for state disability assistance and to be eligible for it, the state requires that you also apply for Social Security at the same time. All right. The reason for that is, as it's noted here as the second term and condition, is that if you ultimately get approved for Social Security benefits, what you will actually end up having to do is that a portion of the benefits you get from Social Security will be used to pay back the state the $200 that you've been collecting through state disability assistance in the meantime. All right. Because of these conditions, a good way to think about state disability assistance is that it's kind of like a loan program, but without an interest rate. All right. So that's it for state level disability cash benefits programs. Now let's move on. Let's talk about Social Security. All right. Social Security, the Social Security Administration actually offers and administers a variety of benefits programs. I have listed a few here. Retirement is probably the one that most people are familiar with, but in addition, there are survivor or spouses benefits, there are dependent benefits, and of course, there's going to be Social Security disability benefits and supplemental security income. All right. Now, for purposes of today's presentation, we're just going to focus on the last two here. We're going to focus on the state Social Security disability benefit, and we're also going to look at supplemental security income. Now, I'm going to be using the word Social Security benefit generally during this presentation. And when I say Social Security, we're just going to focus on these two. Okay. All right. So Social Security disability insurance. What is this? So Social Security disability insurance is actually an entitlement program that you pay into through FICA taxes that gets deducted out of your paychecks. All right. So a good way to think about this benefit program is like insurance policy, much like the ones that Kathy was talking about earlier, except for this one is through the federal government. All right. To be eligible for this government-sponsored insurance program, the non-medical requirements for this program requires that you need to have paid into this program, all right, through those FICA taxes. So if you think about it like you pay insurance premium, your FICA taxes are more or less acting kind of like your insurance premium, all right? And along with that payment of this insurance premium, it will cover you for a certain period of time, all right? When what we see sometimes is that if someone was working for a long period of time, leaves work and doesn't work for an extended period of time, when they try to apply for Social Security disability insurance, they will learn that unfortunately they are no longer insured, right? Which sometimes can become a problem, all right? Now, as part of this benefit program, they do require that you are not working and earning more than $1,470, and this is the number for the year 2023 for a non-blind person. Okay, there's a difference limit there for someone who is blind. All right. And as far as the medical requirement for this benefit program, which we'll talk about more later on, there is a very specific definition of what is disability and a very specific way of how they evaluate whether or not someone is disabled. Okay, but before we get to that, let's talk about work credits, right? So I've told you that you need to earn work credits to be eligible for this program. How do you actually earn it? What do you have to do? All right. The way it works is that you can earn up to 4 work credits per year, 1 per quarter. And to earn 1 credit for the year 2023, you need to have made at least 1640. Okay. And to be eligible for retirement benefits when you hit your early or full retirement age, you need to have earned at least 40 credits during your lifetime up to that point. All right. Now, the amount of credits you actually need to be eligible for Social Security disability insurance will vary depending on your age and also when you claim your disability began. All right. So if you look at this slide here, if you were claiming disability before the age of 24, you need to have at least earned 6 credits in the 3 years before your disability began. Whereas if you are 31 or older, the requirement there is that you need to have earned at least 20 credits within the last 10 years before your disability began. All right. Okay, so how do you actually figure out, and do you need to do this math yourself? The answer is no. Okay, so there are some quick, easy ways to find out whether or not you've earned enough credits and if you're eligible for Social Security disability insurance. Okay, the first way, if you are good with technology and are pretty savvy with the internet, you can go to ssa.gov, which is the website for the Social Security Administration, and you can sign up for one of their free My Social Security accounts. All right, when you set up that account and go into your specific account, it will have a list of your earning history per their records. It will show you what is your early retirement age, when is your full retirement age, what is the amount of benefit you can expect based on your current earning history, and most importantly, for purposes of this discussion, are you eligible for Social Security disability insurance and how much that benefit will be. All right. Now, if you're not so good with the internet or don't have access to the internet and can't use this website, you can always call up your local Social Security office and ask them that question. They can give you that answer pretty easily. And if that doesn't work, you can always call the national toll-free number, which I've provided here on this slide. Okay. All right. So now that we've talked about Social Security disability insurance, which is a program that you have to pay into, what happens if you've been sick for a long period of time and you're not eligible? What do you do then? Well, that's where supplemental security income comes in, all right? Supplemental security income is a need-based program. It's for persons who are age 65 or older, and people who are blind or who are disabled. Okay, so a lot of time what you'll see is that for individuals who are in their 60s and would normally be at their full retirement age or 65 or older, but haven't really worked enough to be eligible for retirement benefits, SSI would be the benefit that they may be eligible for. All right, and the best way to think about SSI versus the Social Security disability insurance is that this is a welfare program. All right, so there are going to be income and asset limits. So let's talk about those. As far as resource limits, they're not very high, all right? So for a single individual, the resource limit is $2,000, okay? If you have more than $2,000 in countable resources or assets, you're not eligible for this program. And for a couple, the amount is $3,000. Okay, as far as some of the common assets or resources that the Social Security won't count towards this dollar limit, your primary residence, if you live there, and one motor vehicle per household. Okay, so one common challenge, as you can imagine, for let's say someone who's married and they're disabled, but their spouse is not, and they might have 2 vehicles in the home. Unfortunately, the second vehicle and the value of that vehicle will count towards this asset limit. Okay. The other common asset or resource that gets excluded is life insurance policy up to a $1,500 cash value. All right. So that's resource or asset limits. Now let's talk about income. All right. The general rule that I like to live by when it comes to income for SSI benefit purposes is that if there's income coming into the household in one way or another, unless it's from a government benefit program, more than likely it will count against you, all right? And how it will count against you will depend on whether or not this is income that's earned versus income that is unearned. For example, if you have stocks or a pension or something that you're not actively working in order to bring that money into the home every month, okay? For unearned income, the easy rule there is that typically they'll exclude the first $20 or so, and then everything else will reduce your SSI benefit dollar for dollar for the month that you have that income coming in, all right? For income that is earned through working either by you or your spouse, if you're married, that math is a little bit more challenging, right? Typically, they will exclude either $65 or $85 off the top, and then they will then exclude the remaining 1/2. And then everything that's left will then be what gets taken out of your standard SSI amount to figure out what your benefit will be in that month. Okay. Now, because of that, what you'll see sometimes if you are married and your spouse is working is that while you may be eligible for SSI, the benefit amount may be pretty low. All right. So let's look at some categories of individuals who aren't eligible for SSI, period, unfortunately. So someone who unfortunately has a felony that's still outstanding or an arrest warrant, those individuals aren't eligible. Someone who's currently in prison or in jail are not eligible for these benefits. The same is true for someone who is in a public institution and there are very specific rules around that. Non-citizens, unless you have a certain immigration status here in the US, you may not be eligible for SSI benefits. And even if you have certain immigration statuses, they may limit the time frame in which you're eligible for these SSI benefits. All right. The last thing I'll bring up here is divestment. Okay, divestment happens when someone has, let's say, these extra resources, maybe $5,000 in the bank account, and then to be eligible for SSI to get below that $2,000 or $3,000 limit, they give money away to family, they give money away to the kids, etc. In those situations, Social Security would say, no, that's not okay, right? The idea is that Social Security wants you to spend that money on you and then to only rely on this benefit program when you absolutely need to, okay? All right, so now that we talked about sort of non-medical requirements for these benefits programs, let's switch over and let's talk about the medical requirement and what do we actually mean by disability under Social Security rules, right? So the definition of disability is the same for both SSDI and SSI programs. It doesn't change, right? It's the same rule, it's the same government agency. It's just the other components of the program requirements that are different, okay? Now, here's a common thing that I hear from clients, which is, but I am disabled. My doctor diagnosed me with all these health problems and I'm taking medicine every day, okay? And as true as that may be, unfortunately, Social Security does have a very specific definition of disability. And even though your doctor says that you're disabled, unfortunately, whether or not you're disabled under Social Security's rules is a determination that they make and not your doctor. So that's one of the downsides that I want to make sure that people understand. All right. So what does disability actually mean? And I'm going to read this to you, and sorry, it's a little clunky, but this is the language. It's the inability to do any substantial gainful activity because of medically determinable physical or mental impairment that can be expected to result in death, has lasted continuously for 12 months, or can be expected to last continuously for 12 months. All right, so the time frame there is a little bit different from the state disability assistance through the state of Michigan that we talked about earlier, where the time frame is only 90 days. Okay. All right, so how does Social Security actually use this definition and look at somebody and figure out whether or not they're disabled? Okay, the way they do that is using this process that they call the 5-step sequential evaluation process. And we're going to walk through each step of those quickly. All right. The first step is, are you engaged in substantial gainful activity? Now, the question really is, are you working? And if so, how much are you earning? More than likely, if you are earning $1,470 a month in this year, you're probably going to be found not disabled because the government has determined that that is considered substantial gainful activity. You can make that much money, you can take care of yourself. I'm sorry. Now, what oftentimes happens with many of our clients is that's usually not an issue. Most of our clients are not working, they're out getting treatment and can't really manage both the treatment and also their job. So if you are not engaging in substantial gainful activity, and they will then move on to the next step, which is step 2, okay? There they're looking at, do you have a severe impairment, okay? It can be physical, it can be mental, as long as you have one severe impairment that impacts a major function of your daily life, all right? And again, there's that durational requirement of that it either has already lasted 12 months, can be expected to last for 12 months, or in some cases, if it's a terminal illness and it's expected to result in death. All right. Now, if you do meet those 2 criteria, you would then move on to step 3 of this evaluation process. Okay. Step 3 is what we call meet the listings. So what happens there is that Social Security maintains a very, very long list of different types of medical conditions and with very detailed explanations or requirements of how severe it has to be before you kind of meet this listing. All right. Typically, if you meet this listing, your application will get approved. All right. And your benefits will continue and so on and so forth. But what we see oftentimes is that the severity of these conditions that are listed in the listings tend to be pretty bad. So the majority of people who apply for Social Security don't typically meet these listings, but on occasion that does happen. All right. But if you don't meet the listing, no worries. We'll just move on to the next step of the process, which is step 4. Okay. At step 4, they're asking, what are the jobs you've done with the last 15 years? And based on your current condition and the different health problems you're managing, can you still go back and do any of those jobs? All right. Now, if the answer is yes, you still have the ability to go back and do some of those jobs you've had in the last 15 years. Unfortunately, the analysis will end there, and Social Security will find that you're not disabled and your application is denied. All right. But if you don't have any jobs in the last 15 years that you can still do, they will then move on to the next step, which is the final step, step 5, where they look at, well, based on your current condition, are there any type of jobs out there in the economy that you can still do? All right. If there are no other jobs out there that you can do, then your application will get approved at that point. Whereas if there are jobs that you can do, then if there are jobs out there that you can still do, then your application will get denied. But if there are not, then at that point, your application will get approved at that point. All right. Here's a common issue that or a comment that I get from clients, which is that if Social Security can find me one of these jobs and get the employer to hire me, I'll do it. All right. And I fully understand and appreciate how my clients will feel that way. But just by what the law requires, Social Security under this step does not need to prove that there is actually this job, that there is an employer out there that will actually hire you for it. They just need to prove that there are these types of jobs that you can physically do based on their analysis. And there are so many numbers of them out there in the economy. All right. Okay. So now that we talked about how does someone get evaluated and be found disabled, I would just quickly note here that this is probably the step that most people get the applications approved at. Step 3, which I talked about earlier, very rare. Most people who get approved for Social Security usually gets approved at this step. Okay. All right. So how do you actually apply? There are a variety of different ways you can apply for Social Security benefits. If you are eligible for SSDI benefits and you're good with a computer, you can do it through your My Social Security account and do it online. All right. If you're eligible for SSI benefits, unfortunately, that application at this point is not user-friendly. It's the way that Social Security frames it. So you have to schedule a telephone appointment with them, and they'll take the application from you by phone. Okay. Quick thing I'll note here is that one thing that you might have heard from anyone who has applied for Social Security is that it can take forever, it seems. It can take months and months and months. But a quick thing to note here is that if you have a medical illness that's on this list that Social Security maintains called the Compassionate Allowance List, or if you have a medical condition that they consider to be terminal under their rules, that is something that you need to tell them so that they will expedite your application for those reasons. Okay, so that's one of the few ways to get your application to be sped up processing wise. All right, so what is this process? What does this look like after you actually apply? All right, so I got a little diagram here. When you first apply for your benefit and you submit the application, it will get reviewed by that same state agency that I told you about earlier, DDS, the Disability Determination Service. This is a paper review. They're not going to talk to you too much besides figuring out what are your medical problems, who are the doctors you see. They'll just pull those records, review the records, and then they'll make a decision, all right, which will either be approved or they will deny. All right. Now, when they deny your application, which happens 80% of the time at this stage, you do have the right to ask them to reconsider it. Okay. And that's what exactly you'll be filing, which is a request for reconsideration. All right. You're just saying, hey, DDS, I think you got this wrong, or something else has changed with my medical situation. It's gotten worse. Can you look at my application again instead of making me reapply? All right. In that situation, DDS will do a second review. And again, this is yet another paper review where they'll get more records, they'll look at them, and then they'll make a decision. All right. And at that stage, they can either approve it, and again, or they can deny it, at which point you then have to request a hearing before an administrative law judge. Okay. An administrative law judge is an employee of Social Security of the federal government. They are usually attorneys who have worked as a Social Security attorney for many, many years. When you request a hearing before an administrative law judge, they will usually schedule you for a hearing where that can either be in person, by phone, or by video. They'll take testimony from you, and then the judge will then make a decision as to whether or not you're disabled or not. Okay. Now, the judge may either approve your case at that point, or they might deny it. And if they deny it, which does happen sometimes, you can then request a higher review, right? If you believe the judge was wrong in his or her decision, you can request what's called appeals counsel review. And that's just another department within Social Security that will look at the judge's decision, will look at your case file and see if the judge made a mistake somewhere in his or her decision, all right? Now, if they do find that there is an issue or a mistake that the judge made, what they'll typically do is is a remand, okay? And a remand is they're just gonna send the case back to the judge and say, hey, judge, you made a mistake. I want you to reconsider this case and fix this mistake, all right? It's very rare, but that they will actually approve it at that stage. More than likely, if you are successful at the appeals counsel level, they'll just send the case back to the administrative law judge for a second hearing, all right? Now, because the appeals counsel is within Social Security, it's not uncommon that sometimes they will just rubber stamp the judge's decision and they move on, all right? In that situation, you do have the ability to actually file a lawsuit in federal court asking the federal court to review the Social Security Administration's decision in case you believe that Social Security is not following its own rules, is giving you an incorrect decision, all right? And in those situations, if you're successful there, more than likely, again, you're gonna get a case that's gonna be remanded all the way back down to the judge's level for the judge to rehear your case and to make a new decision at that point, okay? All right, so that's the overall process. Time frame wise, quickly, you can expect a decision, hopefully in the worst. If your medical condition is very severe, you can expect a decision within a few months. In the worst case scenario where things take a little bit longer, you have to go through multiple levels of appeal, that's where you can see someone having to spend possibly sometimes years going up and down this ladder trying to get their case approved, all right? Okay, so what are the benefits that you actually get once you get approved? With SSDI benefits, because it is an insurance-based program, how much you get paid out of it as a monthly benefit will vary depending on how much you paid into it, all right? And along with that, you will get Medicare coverage after you've been receiving the benefit for 24 months. And the nice thing about the SSDI benefit is that it does come with what's called auxiliary benefits, which is benefits that can be paid to your spouse or dependents because you're disabled, but there is a maximum amount for the entire family as a whole, all right? With SSI, it's a little bit different. With it being a welfare program, there is a maximum dollar amount. And what you're looking at there is $914 a month this year for an individual versus $1371 for an eligible couple where both individuals are disabled, all right? And here in the state of Michigan, if you're eligible for at least $1 of SSI benefits, you do automatically get Medicaid through the state of Michigan, all right? Okay, so now that you get approved, what's going to happen? Quickly, there are this thing called concurrent benefits, which is when someone receives both a portion of SSDI benefits and also SSI. The reason for that is because if you paid into the Social Security system, but not a whole lot, your monthly benefit based on your earning history may not be very much. For that reason, sometimes you'll see someone get SSDI for maybe $500, and then SSI will come in and will supplement that a little bit, so that overall you get around $914, which is the federal benefit rate for this year. There is going to be what's called BAT pay, which is when you get approved, and BAT pay is just the benefits that Social Security should have been paying you this entire time while you've been going up and down these appeals and trying to get your claim approved, all right? That may be, the money there may be issued to you in installments as opposed to one big lump sum check. It depends on the benefit program. The other thing I'll quickly note is once you get approved, they are going to be reviewing you every so often, just like what Kathy mentioned with the private insurance and long-term and short-term disability insurance. With Social Security, they will look at you every so often, just make sure that you're still disabled under their rules. And I'll quickly also note here that there are going to be some reporting requirements while you're receiving benefits under these programs, particularly if you're going back to work, if you're stopping work, and for SSI purposes, if your household changes, your income changes, or your resource changes, okay? So with that, I'll just leave you with some resources that you may tap into as far as finding legal assistance. If you're a Carl-Manos cancer patient, please feel free to call us. If you're not, you can try Lakeshore Legal Aid. And then there are also some private attorney information there for you as well. All right. Okay, so I'm going to end it there and take any questions.
Oh, that was really great, Min. Thank you so much. Will you put it back on that last slide, and we'll just let people have that be up in case anybody wants to take any of that down. We got a bunch of questions in the chat, and so I'm going to go ahead and get started for Min and Kathy, whoever wants to answer. We had a couple of questions related to, are there options for income or assistance for retirees with limited income? So if someone is retired, they're no longer in the workforce, they have like pension, Social Security, maybe some other assets. Are they sort of, if they don't already have some supplemental insurance, are they kind of out of luck, or are there any other options for them to supplement their income if they're dealing with cancer or another serious medical diagnosis?
I would say that pretty much the only thing that somebody would be eligible for would be SSI, and it would be offset by any other income they have coming in. And that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
so if you have other income already and all of that totals to about $914 this year, more than likely SSI is not going to be an option because you would have maxed out at that point. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So here's another one. One of the attendees says, I'm a breast cancer patient currently in remission. My SSDI was recently stopped because they said I work substantial, which isn't true. I'm currently appealing that. I only work 4 hours a day, 3 to 4 days a week. Can they restart my payments with proof of salary? So how do people handle it when they're able to work some of the time, but not enough? Then what happens?
I can take that question, Kathy. So when you're receiving SSDI, there are very specific rules for when you go back to work. And the thing I will often hear people say is, well, I'm not going back to work full time. That's not how, unfortunately, how they evaluate you going back to work. What they focus on is how much you're earning. The way it works is that they start you off on what's called a trial work period, and that is 9 months within a rolling 5-year period where you can earn as much as you want in a given month, and they'll still give you your benefit amount for that month, all right? And to hit one of those trial work months, I believe for this year, if you make about $1,000 or more than likely that month is going to consider one of the 9 trial work months, okay? Once you've actually used up those 9 trial work months, they then put you in what's called the extended period of eligibility. And that's a 36 months or 3-year period of time where they will again look at your monthly earnings, and this is before taxes, and see, are you making for this year $1,470 or more? If you're making $1,470 or more, then you're not eligible for benefits for that month. If your earnings drop below that the next month, they'll give you that benefit, and then that keeps going back and forth depending on how your income fluctuates. Now, when someone has used up their 9 trial work months and have used up the 3 years of extended period of eligibility, what you can do at that situation is you can sometimes ask them to do what's called an expedited reinstatement, all right? Which is saying, hey, I'm disabled again. I can't really make that much anymore. Can you put me back on benefits? All right. It's kind of like a new application, except for they will give you provisional benefits in the meantime. So they'll give you your normal benefits in the meantime while they're doing that assessment, with the condition, of course, that if they ultimately find that you're not disabled, you will have to pay it back. But it will make the process a little bit quicker in those situations. And from what I'm told, usually for people who ask for expedited reinstatement, most of those cases get approved fairly quickly as opposed to newer applications.
Great, thank you. Here's one. Can you receive benefits if you had a cancer diagnosis over 5 or 10 years ago? So
you can. The thing is that you have to make sure that you are eligible, and you would have to then provide information that shows that you actually began that disability back then. And a lot of times that can be really difficult because it's a matter of pulling records that are now 5 and 6 years old. It's not impossible, but it's pretty improbable.
Okay.
And what I'll just add to that is, depending on which program you're applying for, just because you're claiming benefits way back in the future, way back into the past, it doesn't mean that you will necessarily get all those years of benefits either. For the SSDI program, from the time that you apply, they will let you go back as far as a year. And benefits, if you can prove that your disability began more than a year ago. For SSI, the benefits began no earlier than a month after you apply. So there is that limitation there as far as how much you actually get.
Wonderful. It is 6:29, so we are just about at time. I want to take a minute to thank both Kathy and Min so much for sharing all of this information. This is a really intense amount of information. I did not fully recognize how much ground we were going to cover in this hour. It truly is a lot. So thank you both for being here. Thanks everyone who showed up and asked questions, stayed the whole time. We have had some requests to share slides. If we're able to share the slides, we will. If not, we will definitely send a recording of this talk to people, send a link to the recording so people can go through. I know I for sure didn't catch everything the first time through and could use some repeat.